What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Hello, I'm Eric Froton with Josh Chevalier and JD Yonke, and this is the CFF All Access Podcast. Thank you very much for joining us. And as I put out on Twitter, as a little teaser, we're going to kind of go off a little bit of the board. We try to stick to the college fantasy type stuff, but since we all do props and we all love props, I figured heading into week 10 would be an opportune time to dive into see what did the season-long player props markets look like, right? We really haven't talked too much about them. It's been in the past, but now we're far enough along the path here that we have some of them have already cashed, and many others we at least have an idea if they're going to be not cashing with some toss-ups. So I went and had chronicled all the drops from Bet Rivers on the initial drop, and then also the relevant line movement, if there was something I was interested in, checked in it a few weeks later. And then again, right before the open of the season. So we had a pretty good barometer of seeing where they opened, where they moved, and then what I played and how they worked out. So before we get into the actual plays, I wanted to talk to Josh and JD, since we do have kind of philosophically a little bit difference of opinion, because these season-long props are a little bit, I would say, almost not controversial, but they're not for everybody. Some people, and understandably so, they don't want to tie up their bankroll for something they know isn't going to come in or not come in for 3 to 4 months, while you have the ability to take that money and use it and create velocity with it and turn that over several times each week, essentially, if we're doing this during the regular season. Josh, and then, JD, follow up. Can you talk to me about how you feel about season-long props and whether or not, you even engage in them or how you approach them?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is I haven't engaged them in the past. And part of that is that, one, I can only play prize picks, underdogs, which are like parlayed props. And so tying up season-long props into something in the money there is like kind of tough for me. I mean, to be honest with that, where it's like, some of them where I'm like, yeah, I know this one will hit, but maybe not this other. Makes it a bit tough, a bit risky. Also, like, quite honestly, I've had a lot more money, a bankroll tied up into like C2C, CFF, like season long leagues and like the DFS market. And so the props stuff, like season long, I haven't touched as much as I have just the week to week stuff, because I've just enjoyed that more than just, tying up any kind of money into something that takes 15 weeks to hit. Just as like, it's just a hard, like, for my mind, I just don't, I'm not waiting that long to get money out, I guess is my main deal.
JD?
Yeah, similar for me. I just don't have the greatest access. So I know I've gotten questions in the years past, like, what do you like? They just dropped. And like, there's always a million people tweeting the day they drop. And I get it's exciting. It's like National Signing Day or something, but it's never been really something I do. I've done a few in the years past, and then you get like 1 or 2 people injured. And if it's on a site where you piece them together, it's just really not enough meat on the bone, in my opinion. Plus, at least for me, just the access I can get to, like pretty much being so severely limited at any sites I can really get real money on. It's like I'm probably not really going to have real money on it anyway. So yeah, for me, it's just not worth the handicapping time to get just a few cents down.
Yeah, I suppose that kind of gets you in the mind of my complete and total degeneracy, because I played a lot of season-long props this year. I basically, me and Bainbridge are thick as thieves when it comes to this stuff. I basically beg him to do it with me. I'm like, come on, Bainbridge, we got too many good ones. I shouldn't say that. Bainbridge's game too. That's definitely like a big part of what we do. I went and took a look, and I see it here. I have 27 different players that I put season-long wagers of 1 unit or more on. So we have plenty to discuss and kind of go through, as well as, some of the discrepancies from where these lines opened up to where they ended up finishing. So what I'll do here to start up, first off, let's give, as always, thank you very much for for coming and watching us and for commenting. And definitely like if you can. That helps the algorithm. We want to try to boost it up. Already see Luke Probasco, the great Luke Probasco from the G5 Hive, one of our favorite podcasts, of course. My boy Karen Shetty. Mentioning the great Cade McNamara, huh? Cade McNamara, thank you for all you've done for us and the overs. Thank the books for putting him out at 147.5 this week. Like he was out at 130 each of the past, 3-4 weeks, and you juiced him this week. The week he loses and he goes bye-bye and we get Brendan Sullivan. Oh God, what a wonderful thing college props are. And lastly, the national championship, we got Bobby played a few. Lacey at 750. Good stuff, Bobby. Thanks for the contribution. Omari Hampton, 975. That was his open, I believe. That was right out of the gate. That's nice work. He closed a little over 1,000. Trey Harris, we'll be talking about him. Everybody I know had Trey Harris and Tet McMillan. You see him at 900 there. Dart at 2850. Another great look. The thing is with these props, if you chose the right one, they were significantly slanted to the overs. And I'll kind of get to that right now. A couple of the great ones that were mentioned. Trey Harris, 675 is what we got for an open with him. I mean, simply, I don't know what it is. He already went for 900 last year. He went for over that. He got a little dinged up. He would have went for well over 1,000. Even though he's been hurt, he's already over that. He went over that in like week 6. Like here we are, week 10. That's in the books. That was a halftime cover there for Trey Harris. So, if you pick these right with the overs, at least, you're going to be able to get paid out before that last 400, the last 4 months goes. Another good example was Dane Key. Dane Key came out at 400 even yards. He's already over that, and he's cashed that and proven to be, of him and Barry and Brown. Brown is more the manufactured touch guy with the return acumen. And Dane Key has been the deep threat and pretty much the all-around number one weapon for whatever that worth out of that passing game. I'm going to go through a few more of just the big stuff and then get to things that I feel like I missed on. For one, Diego Pavia coming over to Vanderbilt. And just the quarterback position in general is where you got to kind of start. You get a lot of QB lines out there early because they're the ones that have, obviously, you're going to derive the most action. And their perception, in terms of perception, the easiest to project, right? But you got to keep in mind, like some of the guys we put out, Blake Shapen was out there with a 2,300 open, gets up there to like 2,450, got hurt last year, gets hurt again this year. He's out. First year over there at Mississippi State, Max Johnson gets a 2,400 open, ticks down to 2,300. We don't know what we're getting out of that UNC situation heading into the year. DJU, 2,300. Again, switching. He was fine over there at Oregon State. You go and plop him into Florida State. Does not work out in the same manner, obviously. Preston Stone, 2,700 yards. He was opened at. We know what the situation is over there with Kevin Jennings. We've barely seen Preston Stone even take the field. But, those are there's cautionary tales there, but, there's obviously plenty to be excited about. Diego Pavia was 1,600 yards. That's absolutely incredible. Like he hasn't crossed that yet, but we're 8 games in, and we all know that is easy and that's coming. Another one that I hit that was great. Brendan Sorsby, 2,000 passing yards. That Cincinnati system, they were basing the lines off of Emory Jones last year, who was, again, there's that dual threat who's more of a solo threat. I mean, that is literally Emory Jones. And they were ascribing that skill set to Sorsby, even though he's obviously a much better passer. He's already crossed that 2,000 yards mark as well. Let's talk about Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers opens 3,100.5. Do we know what's going to happen with him? I mean, Josh, Arch Manning looming, 3,100. That is frankly what we've seen. I think the highest I probably saw was around the 3,400 mark. There really wasn't the Caleb Williams 4,100 that we saw of yesteryear. Yeah, that was the thing. Caleb.
Yeah, I remember that.
It
Yep.
didn't transpire as
Yeah.
you imagine. It's like, and that was last year. It was the first year of the clock changes too. It's like, all right, we're going to be running the clock all the time on first downs now, and we're going to throw a 4,100 at you. They at least modified that a bit. But Ewers at 3,100 with who knows what happened with Arch. That was a particularly risky line. Any one of those that you hear. Oh, and obviously, I'm sorry, Cade McNamara. They put out Cade McNamara, 1,450 yards. Congratulations, everybody. It isn't just the week-to-week, cashes we were blessed with. If you went and saw them, any number was pretty much good with Cade McNamara as long as it was over 1,000 yards or so. How can you sit there and trust him to be able to keep a job full-time and for that Iowa offense? So any of those lines that we just discussed here that popped out, or anything, any guys that you have curiosity about that I could give you an idea, such as Cam Ward, 2,850. I know you're supposed that.
Yeah, totally. Here, let's take a quick break. And I got some questions about process for you on this and how you decide which props you're picking and which ones you're not. But let's take a break real quick, and then I'll ask you some of those questions. All right. No, Froton, for you, I mean, we haven't talked about this, so this is just a raw question off the top of the dome. But like, do you handicap these yourself? Like, do you have projections that you have or you look at? And is there a certain like percentage yardage mark that you're looking at to choose? Or do you more go off a feel of like, hey, Caleb Williams 4,100 is way too high? Or, how is it? Is this more art or science to you in choosing the props that you choose to select? Of the, you have 27 that you chose. Was it art, science, bit of both? What was your process?
Sure. In terms of what I do, I just do my own stuff and go through everything, take a look at the same sort of stuff we'd look at for college fantasy. Historical play caller. Do they have the same OC? Do they have a new OC? What were their tendencies? What do they have? What did they lose? What did they transfer in? How did this player do last year? How did the player in that role do? As a team, what was their explosiveness rate? Are they more oriented towards the pass or the run? Going through just sort of checking the boxes and then sort of see what sticks out. I'll tell you one thing that, certainly dictated a lot of my plays, just simply injuries. The higher these numbers are, the more likely you're going to see attrition affect whether or not they can hit it. Good example of that was, as we'll get to the running backs, Darius Taylor. He was, I believe, 1,100 and a half, 1,150. It depends on where you looked. And he was pretty much where he heard he was going to miss that first game. It's like, all right, yeah, we know they use him a lot in the pass game. We know they do run the ball, obviously, at Minnesota, but they're in the Big Ten, had a very difficult schedule. And it's not like it's just going to be a given. He's going to roll through it, and he's already going the season injured. So that's something I took, which, look, it's Darius Taylor could go buck wild here for a couple of these games down the stretch and beat that, but that looks things along those ilk. I did take a Hank Bachmeier under, which is going to beat me. Because when was the last time Hank Bachmeier didn't get hurt? Come on, guys. Can you blame me for that one? So that sort of thing, injury factors, competitiveness. That goes back to Quinn Ewers. I took his under 31.5 under. He ticked down to 2,900, pretty much after a few weeks, and the market sort of settled in on him. So that was certainly a factor as well. You have to look at like how tenuous is the grasp on this job. Graham Mertz is a good example of that. Like, okay, you have DJ Lagway behind you. They have the second toughest schedule in the country. To what end? How long does that experiment keep going on for? So a lot of those things don't factor in. You want to think about, all right out of the gate, how can I justify an under, first off, because injuries are going to affect it. It only takes one game to throw you off pace. Alan Bowman opens at 3,000. He's a good example of that, especially the competitive effects. Getting pulled, wrangle, Flores gets hurt. Who knows? Right. We don't know what's going to happen. So let's say those are factors. And then on the other side, just looking for those artificially low lines on guys that just have either a role switch or they just simply, have more talent coming in or are in the second year of a coach's system. You know how this all goes, and they have sort of their personnel in place. you want to look for opportunity for upside. And that's really where you got like a Cam Ward, 2850. There's upside
Yeah.
there. We talked about a couple others. I'll even go as far as say, you look at Cade Klubnik is a good example. 2650 is he was lined at. He's gonna bash that. I mean, that is
Right.
a thing of the past here. So I would say those sort of entrenched quarterbacks, Garrett Nussmeier at 2850 is a great example of that too. Entrenched, you know what they are. We've seen them before. You feel confident about their role. They're not going to be usurped by somebody else who's coming up behind them. That sort of stability is something that I'm willing to bet on. But more often than not, there's the Ethan Garbers and the Graham Mertzes, and the Grayson McCalls, and the Donovan Smiths of the world. Look at all of them. These guys all got lines 2250 on Smith. McCall 2450, guys like that. Garbers 2550, Hudson Card 2250. You had a lot of players along those lines that are either injury prone or sort of vulnerable because of performance related potential issues that were well worth the speculative unders for their plays. I will say Curtis Rourke was 1950 at open too, and oof, what a smoking deal that's been.
Yeah. Let me ask you about this. Bobby here in the chat, he talks about we had the I at 900 and Sawcheck 825.
Oh.
He says pain, just pain. But so let me ask this question. You have a running back position where they get a lot of hits, right? And so you just don't even know how that might play out over the long term. And so if you see, you talked about Darius Taylor and the high rushing prop, but even some of the, are there certain, is running back a position that you tend to stay away from because there is the bigger risk for injury there and missing games? Or is it just player by player, prop by prop, like that?
Yeah, I would say I probably do lean against the rushing props a little bit, especially if it's something that I like of an over, unless it's simply too good. And we'll go into what I took. So first off, the best rushing props of the year, in my opinion, because I didn't take many of them. On 7/12, July 12th, Bet Rivers put out Quinshon Judkins at 650 and Trevion Henderson at 645.
Wow.
And it's just if you're going to have Chip Kelly there, you can have those guys balancing each other off. You don't have the same workload concerns you do with other running backs, as you do with those two, because that there's going to be that nice balance. It's a 1-2 punch. There's nobody else down there besides People. He's a true freshman, and that's only in blowout city. Most backfields have an element of being shared anyways. And those two, you can look and say, all right, we know we're getting them. We know these two are the guys. And it's been that clear 1-2 punch. With both of those at 650, I couldn't help but hit a double shot on that. Hit a couple times. And those two are both going to come over pretty easy. But at the same time, there was opportunity for sort of arbitrage and the ability to middle some of these, because after some of these soft early lines went out, as the season approached, I hit a few more in here, and one of them was a Quinshon Judkins. On August 14th, Judkins, MGM put him out, right? Put him out at 900.5 rushing yards. So that gave us from Bet Rivers gives us the 650, and then you're going to get a 900 over there on MGM, because it's simply there's a large disparity in the marketplace too, where there's kind of uniformity on this week-to-week basis, especially later on in the season. And that's something we're able to kind of take advantage of for sort of outlier games, because it feels like they're almost on an algorithm sort of at this point. Yeah. There's no standardization to how these lines are put out. And Bet Rivers is a small operation who's trying to, poke their head up above the water. They're not exactly going to be in market with some of the bigger boys, guys like MGM, FanDuel. They have different lines. So
right.
That's something that when those initial drops come out, that's something that our good friend, Mr. Katz, the influencer, the great Mr. Andrew Katz, who I'm sure we'll have on at some point. He certainly subscribes to. Oh yeah, I'd love to have him on to talk this, but he certainly subscribes to that one as well, and it allows you to come back and get those middle ops, because I loaded up enough on Judkins at the beginning that when that 900 came out, that hedge is a 250 hedge. And I mean, man, I think that 900 looks good on the under. I think the 650 looks good on the over, and it's a 2-for-1 special. Those opportunities do present themselves. Ibuka was another guy who I believe had like a 650 open and an 850. He had like a 7 open, and then he had an 850 later on. Just sort of little things that you can take advantage of at the beginning, and then as things sort of progress. I will say Jordan James on the running back front. Let's give you a few that I took. I took Jordan James over 850 rushing yards for Oregon. Feel great about that. That immediately, shortly after the open on 814 at MGM, went up to 900.
Wow.
And that was, I believe it even opened at 800. I didn't even get it open, but we got an 8 open on Jordan James out there, which sometimes you just can't ignore these sort of things and just say, well, take my money for 800 yards then. You know what I mean? On the other side, Donovan Edwards, 775. I took his under. I was, as we all know, we talked about enough on the show. I don't have to belabor the point, but I was on Khalil Mullings, which is put it that way. And I made sure that I acquired as many shares as I could of him because I just didn't believe in Edwards. And I feel like that's looking pretty good at 775. I took Taj Brooks under 1,100.5 rushing yards. That's going to be on a razor's edge. But with the workload he had last year, does he go and repeat another 300 carries? I'm going to say no. I'm also going to say with their defense not being as good as it was last year, and it certainly isn't. I mean, we see them. They're doing nothing but breeding shootouts over there at Texas Tech. I just didn't think they're going to be able to run the ball with the same sort of frequency and be able to lean on teams and a great defensive line. So, that's another sort of factor that went in my cap. We'll see if that goes or not. On the other side, other running backs, there really aren't any others. Oh, excuse me. RJ Harvey. This is a mea culpa right here. RJ Harvey bought into the hype. Oh, we're going to split carries with Boone. He got so many carries last year. He's 5'8", 180. Like, can he do it again? Yeah, he did it again. I took his under. That was a bad idea. And I've already lost that under. It's gone. It's been blown away.
Yeah.
So, look, I'm not always going to sit here and just give you all the sunshine and rainbows. I got to take some bullets here too. Also, and we will see how this transpires. Jaquindon Jackson, I took his under 825.5 rushing yards because, Raheem Sanders wore down last year in that system. He himself, Jaquindon Jackson, got taken over with Mekhi Bernard, and he got worn down. I'm like, no way. I think he breaks down, and it was looking awful. And then he gets hurt. So now it's
ankles again.
Yep,
guy has no ankles.
Here we are.
I mean,
so
when
that's
you're 6'3", that looks great. Especially after Braylon Russell just looked like an absolute animal.
Ooh, Braylon Russell. I think he might come up
granted, it's
in our
Mississippi
waiver
State
discussion here. I think that could very well happen. Stranger things have. A couple other things I wanted to point out here before we move on. Elijah Badger. We'll get on the wide receivers. 450 receiving yards for Elijah Badger.
Yeah,
smoking deal. All over that. That's one that was in the sort of Dane Key territory where they're just begging you to take it. It's like, and with wide receivers, you don't have the same attrition concerns that you do with running backs. Sure, you might get an ACL, but more likely it's a couple games like we've seen with Trey Harris. Like the soft tissue stuff, they'll pull a hamstring, do a groin, do something like that, an ankle, and they'll be able to at least come back and beat it. If they're giving you good enough lines here with the wide receivers, I took a few. I didn't go crazy, but I stayed at Badger. Trey Harris was 675, just insulting. Guys, what are we supposed to do here? I had him as a top 10 CFF wide receiver. I'm not going to take his 675. Have to.
Yeah.
Like out of principle, there's one of my favorite sayings. I got to do it. Travis Hunter, as our boy Bobby and Shane mentioned, Shane got him at 774. Bro, he opened at 675 on July 9th. I know I chronicled all these. I dated him and everything. I'm a sicko.
That's amazing.
So on the 9th, Trey came out at 675, went up to 774, and it was still a hand wave at 774. I will say Egbuka I took at over 745. Proudly. I have been an Igbuka guy forever. You know this. You know this, Josh. All right. In the Champions League 2 years ago, I cut videos and sent it to the group talking about how people had taken my Igbuka. I birthed him. He was mine. The power wide receiver, the power 3 wide receiver 3 theory, potent offense wide receiver 3 theory.
Yeah.
So I went with him, and then obviously like one of the legitimate crown jewels, and I actually triple bet this. I maxed it every time they let me. I went there. I went to 3 different places that would allow me to do it. Guys, they put Tet Aroa McMillan at 900 receiving yards.
Yeah.
900 with that defense, coming back to Arizona. They didn't bring Tet back to Arizona, to put him on ice. So that was honestly one of the great overs of the wide receiver group. And I will say, surprisingly, and I didn't take any of his lines, Luther Burden. We probably thought he was a lead pipe lock at like the 8.99 and a half that he was out there at. I mean, looking at Burden saying, oh, this Luther Burden, 940 and a half was his open, excuse me. I didn't touch it, and it's probably not going to hit. What do you think? Can we get that out of Burden? Last question?
No. I mean, I don't think so.
No.
JD's like, maybe. But I mean, what
JD?
is he at? What is he at right now? I'm not even.
I don't know.
He's
While you look that up, though, the Gavin, I think he's probably right. No way he's at 750. You kidding me?
Yeah, never mind.
way.
440.
Yeah, I was like 750. Woo! Yeah, 440.
Yeah, divide by 2. Divide by 2.
He's got to get 500 yards.
I mean, I don't even know if Brady
that
Cook's
over
going to
4
play
games.
the rest of the season. And
Seriously.
it's like
And
Drew Pine's not going to get him there.
We saw Drew
Oh,
Pine.
boy.
That was hideous. Yeah, I agree. So that'll do. And I will we'll get to before we move on to a few of these that Bobby mentioned. The Jaden Ott 900 injury. That's the thing with running backs. You got to be petrified of these injuries and why you have to bake them in. And if you notice, that's kind of what I did with my running backs, unless they were great value. Like I didn't touch anything that was really full price that I went over with. Maybe I'm soft, but I just feel like it doesn't take much to take the running backs off of their line, whereas you have a little bit of leeway with the wide receivers. Also, Bobby put out, I think, Lacey 750. Bro, he opened it at 450. We got an open on Kyron Lacey. That is outrageous. Right there with Trey. Also, a couple other fun ones. We got an Oronde Gadsden 375 open. Really real low for Oronde Gadsden. Like pretty surprising. There was actually real awesome hedge opportunity on him because he ended up boosting right up to like that 550 to 575 range or so. So if you got that open, you got 200 yards of pretty fucking strong middle. Oops, sorry about that. It's kind of toggle with. So I'll put that. And then obviously with Sawchuck at 825, we heard a lot about Javonte Barnes in the preseason about him being healthy and how he had made waves the previous season. Man, 825, Gavin Sawchuck. Adios. Sorry about that. So, all right, boys, that's good. That's it for me, Josh. You can do the driving from here.
Yeah, well, let's go. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk waiver wire. All right. Well, we're coming back to the backstretch of the season here, right? We have 2 more weeks for most of us, and then we hit playoffs.
We're hitting the stretch, boys.
Look, waiver wire during these next couple weeks is critical because, look, week 10, 11, 12 is when we get a lot of our second buys for teams.
Horrific set of buys coming up.
Yep. And so if you're right, teetering on the line for playoffs, I mean, a lot of these pickups could be really critical. I do feel like we have some opportunity here, particularly at the QB position, and maybe even running back with some injuries that have occurred or just replacements from poor performance that I think we can take advantage of here and with the playoffs coming up. But JD, let's start with you and your quarterbacks. Why don't you run down your quarterbacks that you have, and then pass it off to you, Froton, after that.
All right, yeah, we got a few to mention this week. Colton Joseph, Old Dominion, is looking like a player here. So this is continuing my theme of mentioning an Old Dominion player every week. But again, Kevin Decker as the offensive coordinator. It's a fantasy-friendly system. It hasn't shown itself yet, but it really is beginning to. They just have a lot of dirt cheap assets, and right now Colton Joseph looks like the best one. For example, he was 5,200 on DraftKings on a short slate, so just dirt cheap. We're talking dirt cheap. He's a young kid. Dynasty people have probably sapped him up already, but he's averaging 26.7 fantasy points per game, and he's hit 34 or more in 3 of his last 4 games. That's in 6-point passing leagues. His rushing ability is elite at the position. He's rushed for 65 plus in 5 straight. So he's a guy who will be owned pretty much everywhere starting next week. Other than that, a little more desperate, but Cooper Legas on Tulsa. We know that Wilson likes his rushing QBs, and that's what Legas is. And you would think he's the starter going forward. He should be after he had 47.9 fantasy points last week. Threw for over 305 touchdowns, and he had 46 rushing. He has some pretty good matchups to finish the year. So if you're really desperate, you need a streamer. He plays UAB in their next game, for example, and you can throw him in there. I won't rehash my reasons, but I talked about ECU last week about Hauser and Chase Saul, and they both absolutely smashed. So Caden Hauser is a guy whose arrow's definitely pointing up. Still in a system that's going to run at the fastest pace in the country, and he's a decent little player. Has a little bit of mobility. Hasn't really shown either. Other than that, Owen McCown definitely a thing now. Even going back when he was in Colorado and those teams were terrible, we were watching Owen McCown being like, this guy's got a little something here. Ends up at a G5 school, and he's just throwing the crap out of the ball. 43 pass attempts in each of his last 4 games, and their defense is really god-awful. So that's going to play. Owen McCown's a thing. And then last but not least, Michael Van Buren, Mississippi State. The freshman has 27 fantasy points in 3 straight games. He's in a good Levy scheme, and the defense is in your bottom 2 or 3 statistically in every single advanced metric you're going to look at. It's real bad. So he's going to keep throwing. So yeah, that's what I had this week. Some interesting like streaming options here, there. None of these guys are really smashes, I would say, but there's definitely a lot more intriguing options. You see some teams kind of like going towards teams, and a lot of these are rushing quarterbacks, or like their original starter to start the year isn't really doing so well. Like, for example, Legas coming in for Kirk Francis. And there's some interesting options here.
Wow. Well, as we get to this part in the season, the thing about the quarterback position when it comes to waiver wire is there's only so many guys left, right? I had 4 guys listed with a extra credit, and JD hit every single one of them. I did not have Cooper Legas, but I had McCown, Joseph, Mr. MVP, MVB himself, and then Cat in the Hat Hauser. So you hit every single one. You hit the grand slam of all my QBs. So I will leave them. I only say McCown, 19% owned, Joseph, 9%, MVB. I love it. I love being able to do the 3-letter thing like TVD, MVB. Like, I'm really excited about Mr. Van Buren. And he sounds so regal. Van Buren, the Dutch accent. I like it. And 7%, and then Cat and Hauser 6%. However, a very, very, very important quarterback that needs to be mentioned and that has been talked about so many times in the summer. I mean, I've been waiting for it. 5 Dynasty or C2C shares. It's finally Hammond time.
Yes,
Will
I
Hammond,
was waiting for you to bring him up, Froton.
Will Hammond, quarterback, 4-star, Texas Tech. Finally, we get the Baron Morton, either ineffectiveness or injury that we were talking about. There's another guy who's listed at 1,800 in a season along the line. I just didn't believe it with Baron Morton. I didn't bet it, but I just couldn't bring myself to take it over because I'm like, I know Will Hammond is coming, looming over his every move. And while Baron Morton has done enough, has been competent as a 5th-year system QB. Like, he's the prototype, right? Just
Bainbridge's boy.
Bainbridge's boy, Baron Morton, Bruno Bainbridge himself. But when it comes to watching Hammond, dude, I watched every throw he made in that game. And irrespective of what happened at the end where he fumbled on a QB sneak, Kit Lee should have never put him in that position. I probably should have tried to get the first down by throwing. Everything else he did was awesome. I'm talking not just good, awesome. He looks the part. If you just watch just 10 throws from Will Hammond, and you know right out of the gate he's so much better than Baron Morton. Delivery, pocket poise. You watch him like they're putting him in the huddle. He's directing traffic. Like he looks confident the whole time. He's not overwhelmed. Extremely mobile. Wait. Baron Morton can't move. He's basically Drew Bledsoe, right? He's Peyton Manning. Will Hammond is an athlete, and he made multiple quality scrambling plays that are at the proper times. We're stepping up as opposed to rolling out. Everything he did just showed he is a dynasty gem to be acquired and to be cherished. Any keeper or dynasty format where Will Hammond is available, he should be the guy. I mean, I guess Baron Morton, for some reason, they're going to put him out there. I mean, if Joey McGuire's smart, he just puts him on ice. He's coming. And when he does, he's going to be a fantasy monster. So get ready and get yourself Will Hammond. Talked about him all off season. I projected this was coming. It is his time. Stop Hammond time.
We need to cut that just where Froton said Baron Morton is basically Peyton Manning. We just need to
Yeah.
We just need that. No context.
No context.
Right. Context doesn't matter. We've learned from the news that context doesn't matter. Just clip whatever anybody says and just put it out there. It's the truth. It's just the truth.
Yeah, that's hilarious. You know, to his mobility point, that in the red zone we had that RPO where he just like juked the socks out of that defensive tackle. You know the play I'm talking about.
I know, of course I do.
I was like, that's some good agility.
I was at Circa hanging out with like a actual crew of Texas Tech fans, believe it or not, for that game because I was there on Friday night, so I stuck around, went to the greatest sports book in the world to watch all the games at once. And it was like the fervor of these Texas Tech fans watching Will Hammond, and especially on that play, you couldn't help but be excited, you know? So I feel like for Will Hammond's first real audition, it was the proper forum for me to be in. I didn't know it was coming, but it's almost like, fate dictated this was going to happen, that I could be and watch it happen in real time. With just the excitement all around me. The only time I've ever been around a crew of Texas Tech fans, in the last few years. So, my gosh, what a wonderful moment it was getting to watch my beautiful baby boy Will Hammond be birthed.
That's awesome, man. And look, we'll talk about more about Texas Tech later. But hey, one quick thing on Caton Hauser. Have you guys seen the ECU schedule after the bye?
Oh,
down the stretch. Yeah. Listen to this set of teams. They got FAU, then Tulsa, North Texas, and they finish off with Navy. I mean, those first three.
It's on. It's on.
6-point passing touchdown leagues. I mean, look, that kid is gonna just kill it for those games for sure. So
and and on the other side, so are every quarterback on the other side that are playing against ECU's pathetic defense. They're going to kill it too because they got to run up for like 56 this week, I think. Yeah. Nice job. Any game ECU's involved in, points are sure to follow. And again, to JD, great call on the Soul Man.
Yeah, that's good. One other one I'll throw in there, and this is just a little bit of speculative, but Marcel Reed. We know he took over for Connor Wegman. If they commit to him, then he's probably available as someone who got dropped in most of your leagues. And they do play New Mexico State. I believe it's week 11. So week 12. The first week of the fantasy playoffs for most leagues. So you can get a nice little deal there. We play New Mexico State and, could crush that. Also plays South Carolina and Auburn in the coming weeks as well. So I think there's some opportunity there with Marcel Reed as another guy. Running backs, Froton. Let's start with you on running backs. So JD doesn't see all your guys with the limited pool. So we'll start with you, and then JD, why don't you finish this up?
Well, I'll try to keep it brief since I do want to make sure that poor JD has had to deal with monologue Froton with the season long stuff today. So I want to give him forum on these. It has to be reiterated. It doesn't need to be belabored. Everybody knows by now. Justice for Ellison, 23% owned. Okay, enough, guys. Everywhere. No more. Another Mississippi State guy. Man, Mississippi State, their defense, trash. But they're fun. They're fun. You got MVB and now Devin Phone Booth, 10% owned. I mean, Johnny Daniels, not to be confused with Jack. We talked about him a little bit. He's there as well. But man, Booth is getting his. He's clearly proved to be the RB1. That 50-50 share, it looks like it's tilting in his favor. And they're a dynamic offense, and they're getting down the field. And you want to have somebody who's in position to be able to score those touchdowns and ring them up, as well as be able to take advantage of the pass heavy script. So when you get those draws and stuff, he's able to, have some space to really work with. I just think at 10%, he's a good value. Amani Marshall, Appy State, 0% owned. Okay. All right. Looks like he's that guy for right now. Have a go at 0%. Deep leagues. Why not? And then LJ Henderson playing at Akron this week. Again, we talked about the hellacious buys. Okay. He's 2% owned. I've talked about him a little bit before, just as an honorable mention, but he had over 100 this week. Looks like he's the dude. And with Maction starting at Akron, I mean, that's a nice little spot at 2%. If you have a need a running back, you could do worse than a plug and play there. Done.
JD, what you got?
I'll start with Mr. Ricky Hunt for Ohio. So Anthony Tyus has been a volume hog. We've talked about Ohio a fair amount on the show because they've been interesting and kind of popped out of nowhere, a few of these players. But it sounds like Tyus might be out a while. It's unsure. It's the max, so stay tuned for news. But I think Ricky Hunt's going to be the guy. And he only had 9 carries, but he took him for 89 yards and a touchdown. And they handed McCormick 13 carries, but he didn't really do much with them. I'm assuming that's just because it was a blowout. And then you already have your RB1 hurt. You're not going to get your RB2 hurt, and you just kind of coast. So I think Ricky Hunt could be a smash if he really is the RB1 going forward. So definitely think he's worth a speculative add with some pretty high upside. Other than that, Braylon Russell, good call on Braylon Russell. Very interesting back. He had 5 runs of 10 or more yards as a true freshman, and we know he's a big bruiser too. He's gonna force some missed tackles. So Jaquindon Jackson, I'm a never Jaquindon Jackson guy. He has paper ankles, and now that he's hurt, I don't know. Who knows what that's gonna look like. And then offense is moving and grooving.
JD, did you see that when he had busted that long run from the 1 yard line, his own 1 yard line, and he, pulled a hand? I don't think he actually pulled a hammy, but it was just so funny. Of he gets 60 yards down the field. It's like, I'm gassed. He's like, I'm done.
Yeah,
it was really funny run. I loved it
because he's one.
It's time to adhere to a better nutrition program in this offseason, son. If that isn't any, that doesn't tell you. Sorry.
It was hilarious, but I mean, the kid is incredible. I mean, he's not built for 99-yard runs, but it was just funny.
He's a beast. I mean, their running backs room been a little confusing, but Trey Biddy, who follows the team way better than anyone, follows him super closely. When he was like, "Oh yeah, this week Russell's the RB1," I'd be surprised if he doesn't get 18 plus touches. It's I mean, I know he's a good true freshman, but he's just quite clearly above anybody else in that room. The rest are just complementary guys, and I think that will be the case for years going forward. All right, a guy I'll mention that's kind of a deep cut, but Robert Henry, UTSA. So we've already talked about how bad their defense is. He's a guy who really caught my eye last year with just some extremely good metrics. And looks pretty good on film, but those metrics really, really stood out, and I didn't see anyone giving him love. So he's a guy that I've kind of had an eye on, and UTSA has been pretty bad this year, so he hasn't done much. But over the last 2 weeks, he's had 36 carries and 7 receptions. So they're clearly making a point to get this guy the ball, and the offense has been doing pretty well. He has 15 or more fantasy points in both games, so that's okay. But when you have North Texas and Temple still on your schedule, it wouldn't surprise me if Henry's a guy that you need as a spot starter, and you're like, oh, there you go. There's 20 points just out of nowhere. So he's an interesting one. Speaking of Arkansas running backs, Isaiah Augustov, 36 carries the last 2 weeks for Colorado. So I know it's Colorado. Probably not going to be a smash, but I want to point out just how impressive he's been. So he found the end zone in 3 straight games. They do have Texas Tech and Oklahoma State still on the schedule, and he forced 10 missed tackles last week. That was tied for a national lead. And all the guys he's tied with are like big time fantasy guys and big time C2C guys. So interesting on Augustov. That's a guy who was kind of impressive as a recruit, but you wind up with as a Colorado running back. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. They're still going to score points. Looks like Augustov's the RB1 to end the year. Other than that, keep an eye on Antoine Raymond for Rutgers. Mononga is, I mean, geez, if you're watching that game, he like lays down on the field for 2 minutes. All of a sudden he's back in the game. Then he's laying down again. So who knows what's going on with Kyle Mononga. It's kind of a mess having to track him in his warm-ups and taking second team reps. And we're doing this 2 straight weeks. I really hope we don't keep doing this with Kyle Mononga for the entire season. It makes it very hard to track. And there's never any definitive news. But Antoine Raymond, the freshman, is definitely a guy who, if Mononga is out, they're going to run the heck out of the ball. Probably not going to give 20 targets to the wide receiver 1 every single week. I know they did it versus USC, and you might say, well, maybe they're going to change the style of play. Well, USC was without 4 of their top 5 defensive backs, and I've called out on the show, I believe, how they're missing their top pressure guys, Gentry and Lucas as well. So it's just a total pass funnel at this point. So, yep, those are my running backs.
Yeah, that's a good one. I definitely smashed the second half unders on Mononga last game, and that proved to work well with him going in and out of the games. Yeah, I know.
Bold putting him
out. I mean,
geez.
They put him out and then hit it, and I think it actually got took down. So, but
I'm sure it
got it before it got took down, which is nice.
Sad.
One thing with Davin Booth from Mississippi State, he does play Massachusetts this week. That's another big reason to pick him up.
Oh yeah, my alma mater. Oh yeah.
There you go. So
they might get. I mean, actually, no, it's not at home. It's at Mississippi State. Who was it? Was it Missouri that went to UMass this year? Went to there. I don't know.
Remember? Yeah, I think so.
Played there. Yeah, good, solid 3,000 person crowd for that one. Nice work.
That's awesome. Well, hey, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and finish up with wide receivers and tight ends. All right. Froton, let's start with you on wide receivers this time.
All right. We'll say that of the groups, the wide receiver group was the least inspiring, I wanted to say, from week to week basis in terms of what's available and also what's available that you can plug in. Junior Luther Vandross for Toledo, him and Jawan Newton have been just a devastating pairing over there for the Rockets. They have Eastern Michigan, and Eastern Michigan's been breeding some pretty nice little shootouts over there. They can score as well. I think you're going to see a pretty competitive contest. He's 17% owned, and I have him in a couple of my lineups because of just how many teams we have on bye. That's somebody you should take a look at. Makai Lemon, I think we mentioned him a little bit last week, but he's still only 23% owned, and he went for $140 and a touchdown. I know I've mentioned it. I know I've said it. I think he's usurped Zachariah Branch as that primary slot option, and they throw the ball 35 to 40 times a game. They did it against, Rutgers. It was a question of whether or not, like, all right, are they just going to run the ball the whole time? Because Rutgers has a pretty imbalanced defense because they're 120th or something in rushing success rate left. They're just and I know it seems impossible, but while Marks got plenty of action and dropped an absolute 40-point bomb out there, there's plenty to go around for Moss too. He threw for 308 yards, and the primary recipient of that, once again, for the third week in a row, is Ben Makai Lemon. This is not a 1 week thing; it's a trend. Well worth picking up. I know they're playing Washington this week, but USC is going to do what USC does. It's a good option, and definitely, as JD had mentioned last week, keep it sweet. Chase Soul is only 17% owned still. He was in single digits last week, still only 17%, and that just can't happen.
Yeah, for sure. What you got, JD?
Yes, just one more thing on Lemon. Yeah, I know I heard Moss. They asked him who would lead USC in receptions and receiving yards in the offseason, and he kind of immediately said Makai Lemon. So it looks like that's going to be the case. Loves him some Lemon. All right, some guys I have, again, no smash spots, but Otto Tia for Utah State looks like the next kind of guy up now that Jalen Royals is no longer playing college football. But Otto Tia, he had 9 targets. Looks like he's going to lead the outside room. Was already in a full-time role. Looks like him and Kyrese White, who's going to be the wide receiver 1 going forward. I don't know, but you have your top outside guy, your top slot guy, and we've already talked about Utah State. Miserable defense, decent offense, playing at a fast-paced offense only. A lot of shootouts. Other than that, Grant Page, I mean, just super deep league guy, but he moved into a full-time role, actually led that team in pass snaps playing on the outside. And he was a number 3 recruit from Colorado once upon a time in his class who transferred to Utah State. So could be an interesting guy. He's only a sophomore, has multiple years of eligibility. JJ Jones on UNC. I hate calling out a UNC wide receiver because it's been tough. But he's been killing it. He had almost 30 fantasy points this last week, 29.9. We can go ahead and round that up. He's now gone for at least 13 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games. And he looks pretty decent when you watch him play. It looks pretty decent. It looks like a really solid outside guy. Deshaun Polk on San Diego State. I know the offense has been pretty bad, but we also know Sean Lewis is the offensive coordinator, and the defense is playing some decent football. So just kind of shows me they're coaching them up pretty well. There wouldn't be surprised if the offense comes on a little stronger in these last couple games. And he has 22 targets in his last 2 weeks. He's at 18 receptions in that time span. So hasn't found the end zone, hasn't quite smashed yet. But when you get that kind of volume and you're just racking them up, I have my eye on you, Mr. Deshaun Polk, as a again just kind of a lineup filler. And last but not least, well, actually maybe least, but Jimmy Holiday, Louisiana Tech, just not playing much. Well, the defense there it's interesting because when you look at their metrics, their defense is going to tell you they're like one of the best in the country. But you watch these Conference USA games and pretty much anything can happen. And Jimmy Holiday's come on strong. They're giving him a handful of carries every single week. They're targeting him in the short game. Had a decent amount of receptions last week. I think you're going to see that keep moving forward. It's basically him and it's True Edwards is pretty much all that's happening with that offense. So if you need some guys, those are some tough ones to fill out a lineup.
Yeah, there you go. Froton, you want to close out with tight ends?
Sure. Bauer Sharp, Oklahoma, 17% owned. Bauer Sharp is like Jack Bauer Sharp when Jackson Arnold is out there. For those of you of the 24 fame, beep, 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 beep. Every time he's out there, he turns into a competent and not just, I would say, potentially a Big 12 caliber tight end. In last game, he had 90 yards, had 10 targets. He was used often, rode hard, put away wet. And that's because what else can Oklahoma really do is just, you have Deion Burks running the short stuff, and then everyone else is injured, and it's Bauer Sharp. So clearly he has a chemistry with Jackson Arnold, and that certainly showed last game. You have to give him a look if that's what you're needing. It looks like Arnold should be the QB there for the rest of the year. And then Sam Roush, tight end, Stanford, guy that in the preseason, it was no secret, he's going into a fairly lucrative position with Benjamin Yurosek moving on. And that tight end position at Stanford has traditionally been a pretty good honey hole and produced multiple NFL caliber tight ends. 15% owned. He had another great week, caught a touchdown pass and was, I think targeted 7 times or whatever have you, for an offense that likes to throw the ball and is typically down and throwing the ball. So that's something that you'll want to take advantage of as well. A couple of pretty good tight ends in the 15 and 17% ownership range.
Yeah, that's good. JD, you have any tight ends here?
I got to mention another Old Dominion player before they cut my mic. My boy Conroy. Pat Conroy.
Yeah.
I think we've mentioned him before, but he's making some explosive plays and getting targeted a handful of times each week. So Pat Conroy.
Yeah, I love that
Nice.
one. He's been
I will mention one more tight end that Bobby over here put in the comments. Tyler Warren's receptions line, 4.5 again. All right. So we like the book's daring us for another over on Tyler Warren. Speaking of great tight ends. Sorry to interject.
No, that's great. I was going to hit on that at the end. Do we think that goes over? I mean, he's got to smash that right against Ohio State.
Hell yeah, they're going to have to use it. How are they going to advance the ball? Is it going to be the Harrison Wallace show?
Right.
I don't think so.
Right.
I mean, it's a clear advantage they have from an athletic standpoint. That's really the one in their passing game that they have, unless you're using one of the backs out of the backfield. They really don't do it much.
Might be giving the books too much credit, but if they think Drew Aller's not playing, maybe that has something to do with it. But either way, it's still low, way low.
Bo Pribula? Have you seen the great? Okay, yeah, you're right.
I love it.
Good point. Good point, JD.
Yeah. Well, couple to finish this out. We talked about him last week ad nauseum, but Caleb Douglas, wide receiver, Texas Tech,
Yep.
I mean, he was the guy early on in the game, and then when Will Hammond came in, Will Hammond, I was like,
Oh, Will
I
Hammond.
actually had
Whoa.
Josh Kelly, some Josh
Oof.
Kelly props on the over, and I was like, oh, this is gonna smash, and I was like, no. Like Hammond only looked Caleb Douglas the entire
Going
like
the
9
outside
seconds,
because he's got the
100
arm to
yards.
stretch the field, baby. We know Barry Morton doesn't.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
You guys
No.
just on Douglas, because I think we're all in on Douglas. Like, do we think he could just be a total fantasy stud? Because he's got 3 straight games with double digits, and he looks amazing.
Absolutely. He's the unquestioned X there, and he's the one they listen to. And we saw Koei can kind of go down. He had an ankle injury at some point during that game. I mean, left. My gosh, if he's down, then it's literally just Douglas and Josh Kelly. I mean, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's what I was hoping Micah Hudson would be over the last 4-game stretch of the season.
Man, no. Maybe do we finally get him if Eakin's down? I mean, come on. All the other freshmen have been, every one of them, that are the hot ones we've seen moments from, and we've seen extended, I would say, examples of elite level play from most of them. I mean, we got obviously Jeremiah Williams, Moore, Cam Coleman made some great plays, Wesco, Ryan Wingo. I mean, all of those guys have had moments of like, all right, we see what's possible here. You want to see it out of Hudson. Come on now. Joey McGuire, Kitley, let's go.
Yeah, totally. Hey, one last tight end for me is Houston Thomas from UTSA. Now, they use a bunch of tight ends in this last game. So, it was, I don't know if he does anything, but, 6 of 10 targets he caught for 132 yards this last game. And look, over the last 3 games, he's averaging 13 fantasy points per game. I mean, only had 19 this last game. So, look, I don't know if he'll be anything, but if you're like desperate for a tight end and there's nothing else on the wire, I mean, he's 0% owned. And I think you can do worse with, again, this UTSA defense being terrible. And they're loving using the tight ends, and Owen McCann has been depending on them. So he's a, deep shot that I'm just throwing out there. We do have one last question that I think chat once answered. Do we think Rourke will play this weekend? Any kind of breadcrumbs you guys have on this?
So he had a nail ripped off of his thumb, which, man, I would assume it's gotta hurt, right? If you're gripping the ball, but at the same time, it's not I don't know. Like, how do you quantify that? I would think there's got to be a chance, right?
Yeah.
How do you even remedy that? Do you put like a fake nail on it? How does that go?
2 screws put in his thumb. I mean, it sounds like,
oh man,
our boy is a huge fan.
I mean,
I don't know.
Full boat, huh? Yeah, surgery.
You guys both play baseball. Like Eric, you played in college, right? You're a pitcher. I mean, if your thumb.
That's my old man. That's Rick Froton, former professional pitcher for the Boston Red Sox. So, yeah.
I mean, if your thumb's messed up throwing any type of ball, I mean, what kind of effect does that have on it? Yeah. I mean,
well, and with a baseball too, it's a smaller object. So,
right.
I'm two seaming it, and it wouldn't really affect as much on my change. I threw a circle. But yeah, I mean, the thumb is directing everything here. The pressure's coming off the fingertips. That's where the velocity, the heat's coming off that. But this is, posing it. I would think it would be better to probably have like a thumb than to have an index finger, because that's where the spiral's coming off, is the index.
Yeah.
I mean, God, neither one's ideal, but for me, when I'm throwing, it would be these 2 fingers I'd be more concerned about than the thumb.
I think I'm just traumatized with Cam Risings. Oh, he's just got a cut on his finger. Can't be that bad. And then seeing everything spiral straight into the ground and just wanting to off myself for 3.5 hours watching that poor game.
Trigger warning. We're talking about Rourke's thumb injury.
Yeah.
Brings back to Rising.
But
this is why
we'll have to see how that goes. I don't even. I wish I had a more definitive answer for you. Gosh, I don't.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe it's in play.
Yeah, one of the things that boy Wes Huber mentored me a lot in this space. He was like never would play a guy coming off an injury, and this is DFS more than anything else. But in DFS, CFF, like I just wait on all that and just see where it all comes out in the wash, and hopefully the bench is deep enough for you to play somebody else at QB.
Yeah, Wes is a mentor to us all, especially JD.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, man, this is a great show. This is fun. We've got a little Cam Rising shout out in the chat. Appreciate you guys being with us. JD and I will be on, or we'll really be releasing the show on Friday. We got 20 props in 20 minutes. And man, it's going to be another good week. We're excited to do this with you guys. Until next time, do small things with great love. What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.